It's Game Boy World, and somebody set up us the Bomberman. Well, it's been a while since the last episode of Game Boy World, and there's a simple explanation for that. We're entering a patch of games drawn from series and franchises and genres that will constitute a serious chore for me to write about. Baseball, wrestling, skateboarding. Truth be told, I'd rather slog through a generic puzzle game or anime license than those. And this patch of dread begins here, with Hudson's Atomic Punk. Jeremy, you say, what do you have against Van Halen? But no, this game, despite the title, has nothing to do with David Lee Roth's screechy warbles. Rather, this is a Bomberman game in disguise. And while I admire the tenacity of the series, nearly 35 years on from its debut, it remains the last Hudson franchise standing today in this dark age of Konami. But it doesn't really do much for me personally. Anyway, for whatever reason, Hudson decided not to call this game by its Japanese title in the US. Over in Japan, it was called Bomber Boy, which absolutely speaks to its origin and nature. It's a Bomberman game for Game Boy, hence Bomber Boy. Simple. American fans, however, wouldn't enjoy a Bomberman Game Boy release under the umbrella of its original franchise and title until 1998's Bomberman GB. Just as Bomberman spin-off Bomber King on NES was retitled Robo Warrior here, Bomber King Scenario 2 for Game Boy would be repackaged as a Blaster Master sequel from Sunsoft. Even more pitifully, the game we received in 1998 as Bomberman GB was actually Bomberman GB 2. When the first Japanese Bomberman GB arrived here, poor Bomberman was reduced to second fiddle status by Nintendo in a game retitled Wario Blast featuring Bomberman. It's a sad existence. Anyway, Atomic Punk here is actually a straight-up Bomberman game. In fact, its Mode B is purely a portable adaptation of the original Bomberman, or at least the NES version of it. Bomberman actually goes back a lot further than the NES original. That release was in fact a remake. The series began on MSX computers in 1983, and before that it was a sort of internal test product for Hudson programmers that eventually was made into a game. Kind of like Kansas's Dust in the Wind, which started out as a guitar warm-up exercise and became their biggest hit ever. That's right, prog rock strikes again. I close my eyes. Hudson quickly abandoned the original game's fat guy in suspenders aesthetic in favor of the familiar cute robot we know as Bomberman today, basing the redesigned character's appearance on the enemy robots from the company's NES adaptation of Lode Runner. Of course, that's just trivia. Atomic Punk has nothing to do with Bandai's Hyper Lode Runner, which appeared on Game Boy World 1989. Nevertheless, Atomic Punk is very much a Bomberman game. The aforementioned B-Mode is the classic NES game adapted to a portable format, and it presents the familiar action that has been the series' template ever since. You control Bomberman, a guy running through a maze of monsters. Your only defense is to lay down bombs that explode in a cross shape. This starts out pretty tricky since your bombs only have a single block range in each direction, meaning that you have to time the explosions for when enemies come within that tiny range. It does become easier as you collect power-ups though, allowing you to extend the range of your bombs or drop additional explosives. There are also speed-boosting items and more arcane collectibles as well, like a detonator that allows you to select the timing of your attacks. However, Bomberman's empowerment comes with caveats. For one thing, he's not immune to his own explosives. You can easily trap and detonate poor Bomberman if you're not careful, and this becomes an even greater danger as you gain the ability to lay down multiple bombs with extended range. When one explodes, it can detonate every other bomb within range, potentially creating enormous bursts that clear the screen of bad guys and you. The enemies become trickier to manage, developing AI routines that demand exploitation and cunning. For instance, some monsters move away from a bomb as soon as they spot it, so you have to figure out ways to pin and trap them. And even if you do wipe out all the critters in a stage, you still have to nuke the scenery until you uncover the exit. But once you find the exit, you have to exercise caution. If you bomb the door, it'll generate a ton of additional monsters. That's the basics, and it should be familiar for anyone who has ever played a Bomberman game up to and including the freshly launched BOMBERMANR for Nintendo Switch. Atomic Punk also includes a competitive mode, though it's strictly a two-player endeavor since F1 Race and its four-player adapter were still a few months away. Most people consider multiplayer the heart and soul of Bomberman, but in the case of Atomic Punk, I think the game is more noteworthy because it represented a pretty significant leap forward in terms of play design for the series, and not in the multiplayer mode. Mode A of Atomic Punk presents players with a huge and rather involved single-player adventure, a more expansive and freeform take on the series. I guess Hudson was sort of uncertain of what to do with Bomberman all around at this point. Not only did they keep changing the game's names in the US and Europe, they seemed to cram the more adventuresome elements into spin-offs. Bomber Boy feels in many ways like an extension of Bomber King, aka Robo Warrior for NES. As in that game, you collect cash as you travel and can purchase power-ups and shops along the way. This game is far more sprawling and free than even Robo Warrior. It contains 8 different worlds, each containing anywhere from 5 to 10 stages apiece. By default, you have only a single life with which to take on these challenges, which would seem impossible. But you can choose to enter the center spot on the world map, aka My Town, which consists of a shop where you can exchange your combat spoils for gear. The most expensive items here at the beginning of the game are elixirs. When you die, each elixir you own works as a 1-up. So if you stock up on them, you can take on a stage with a whole army of Bombermen. There's also a smart risk-reward element to elixirs. You can take elixirs with you into a stage as active items, which means they work as hit points rather than 1-ups. If you take a hit, you use your elixir and keep going, rather than dying instantly and being forced to start over with your next life. However, when you take an elixir into a stage, you'll lose it once you complete that level no matter what. So you can take it along as insurance, but it's a matter of use it or lose it. And given the expense of the items and the limited inventory space you have, you can't just use them wantonly. You can also load up with other items that carry across levels so long as you remain alive. Blast extensions, speed boosts, and more. So there's a real element of rationing and making smart use of a well-balanced economy here. The game allows you to empower yourself, but with enough of an expense added that, again, you have to be mindful of your economy. Each world has its own theme, some of which can be kind of annoying. There's one world, Windia, whose every level contains gusts of wind that push you and your foes in random directions, potentially slowing you enough as you run that you won't be able to scramble out of range of an imminent detonation. The world gimmicks, the enemies within, and the number of stages to conquer within each world create a sort of natural difficulty curve for the game. But as with the Mega Man game, you're allowed to experiment with every world and get a feel for it first. Only the final stage of the game can't be accessed from the outset. You wouldn't want to go there right away anyway. It's the one world that doesn't provide players with a material reward for completion. So yeah, the Mega Man comparison is apt. When you conquer the other worlds in Atomic Punk, you earn a new goodie you can then purchase at the My Town shop. Remote controls, bonus time, even the fantastic ability to survive your own bomb blasts. The more worlds you beat, the greater the range of options you can take into battle, though you have limited inventory space, which means the game demands ever greater strategic planning and more cautious play the further you advance. All in all, it's a pretty excellent game, and it definitely helped inspire the adventure modes in many later Bomberman games. Who knows why it was called Atomic Punk here in the US, but despite the ridiculous new title and cover art, it is pure Bomberman. Like I said, I'm not a huge Bomberman fan, but even I can appreciate the care and quality Hudson invested into this portable spin-off. It's a respectable evolution of a classic series, even if its weird localized name obscures that fact. Next time on Game Boy World, the 90s toot continues as Konami gets both bad and rad.